morning. I'm Kathy Keller, and I'm the worship leader this morning. Would you join me as we light the chalice and sing the old 100th? The words of both are printed in your bulletins. We gather this hour as people of faith, with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs. We light this beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning, in celebration of the life we share together.
Good morning, everyone. I invite you to join me in a time of centering and shared meditation and silence. This is a house of many meetings. It is a chosen place where over the years only those who choose to enter have joined themselves with other men and women who have made a similar choice. It is a house where the deep sanctities of human life are recalled, respected, and enacted in the rich symbolism of naming of children and the dedication of parents, where persons have been joined in marriage, where we gather at the end of a human life to share the deep meaning of its closure. It is a house of gathering, a house of sharing, a house for the meaning of life to be explored in meanings shared. When we enter here and enter into the mood of worship, it is a house where we seek to discover ourselves in the wholeness of this existence. Not to seek forgiveness, but strength for the bearing of burdens. Not to seek escape, but to discover the doorways of involvement. Not for promises and rewards, but for deeper understanding. Here, let us listen, see, hear, think, learn, listen. It is our purpose not to become wise, but wiser than we were. The words I spoke for the meditation were written by my father, Reverend John W. Brigham, on the occasion of a service at the Unitarian Meeting House in Burlington, Iowa, where he served as minister 2 different times in his career. And it was considered a meeting house. It was an old stable house, actually, for an estate. So it can be meeting anywhere. And the sermon I'm going to read was delivered at the First Unitarian Church in Rochester, New York in April of 1967. My father was a minister there from 1966, or actually 1967 until 1974. And actually, before I really start that, I'm going to promote, I have some reprints of it here, Life, I Love You. I also made some reprints of some other meaningful sermons, and I will put them in the rack in the entryway. His first sermon ever in a church, What Religion Means to Me, delivered at the Youth Sunday, February 1931, in the Unitarian Church in Concord, Massachusetts, where he grew up. One of his last sermons in 2002, The Great Enchantment of Religion. So you see his ministry was encompassed by the meaning of religion. And another one called The Oracles of Concord. As I said, my father grew up in Concord, Massachusetts. And in this sermon, he speaks of some of the forebears, you might say, of his religious thinking that lived there Thoreau and Emerson and the Alcott family and others. And they're very, very interesting to find out what he thought about it, having grown up with those ideas. I will have those in the pamphlet back. Life, I love you. There must have been a beginning. At least we like to think that everything has a beginning, although this may be one of the many myths we live by. The reality may be that there is no beginning and there is no end, but that all of life is a process. We are, I suspect, beginning to move more and more to this conception of existence as a process, rather than confined by time or space limitation. The arguments pro and con are not of concern here this morning, for my purpose is to speak of life as I know it, of life as it has known me. And in this sense, I will speak as though there were a beginning, although I cannot say just when it was. I was born on Thanksgiving Day, certainly an auspicious beginning, especially in an old New England family. It is reported, although I do not recall this and could not now prove it, that on my first birthday I nearly choked to death on a piece of celery. Surviving this assault upon my existence, the process of living moves to the first living memory. The first attack on my sensory and perceptive organs that can still be pulled up out of the storage patterns of the brain. This was an event that took place in November of 1918. I was then not quite 4 years old. The circumstances leading up to this event are cloudy and uncertain, but the memory says I was with my brother and sister, both older than myself, and also with my father and mother in the center of the town of Concord, Massachusetts. There were many people around. I suppose older persons would have said there was a crowd. But for myself, I was only aware of being a very small person in the presence of many large persons. This was not enough to create a significant impression, however. The startling and impressive circumstances came upon me as we approached the town square. There, on the green grass, below and beside the great flagpole, I caught sight of the figure of a man, suspended from the neck and hanging from some sort of wooden framework by a rope around his neck. To a 4-year-old youngster, this was a very curious position for a person to be in. And I probably said, although I'm guessing, "Who's that?" Or, "What's that man doing?" I was told, "That's the Kaiser. They're hanging him in effigy." The Kaiser was a word I had known many times, but just what a Kaiser was, I had not been sure. Now I knew. A Kaiser was a man hanging from a wooden framework with a rope around his neck. I looked and looked to see what the effigy might be, but everything else looked normal enough. So I asked, "What's an effigy?" And I was told that it wasn't a real man, not a real Kaiser, but a make-believe one, a pair of stuffed pants and shirt. And I said, "Oh, you mean a scarecrow?" Well, that's about where the story ends. I remember no more of this. But still, the memory of the man hanging in mid-air, suspended by a rope around his neck, haunts me. Effigy or no effigy, the reality of that moment was sufficiently shocking and painful to be the earliest sharp, clear memory of my social life. In the years that came later, I always had a soft spot in my heart for the man who was the Kaiser. In those years, I would from time to time see a picture of him in exile, home in Holland, sawing his wood, tending his garden, pruning his roses. Somehow, I could never quite relate this man with that effigy. They were as distant and distinct from one another as though they were two entirely separate and different persons. The first had been an object of hate, a figure despised and spat upon. The second was a gruff-looking, but nonetheless peaceful-appearing human being. I long wondered about this. I now suspect that my love of life received a very sharp impulse forward from the incident I have described. My father in those days was a Republican. His father and mother had been Republicans before him. We thought well of Calvin Coolidge in our home, and even better of Herbert Hoover, although we understood Coolidge better than Hoover. But we'd better not venture off into politics, for my father made a switch from his family tradition, and I recall him saying at that time, "John, there are times when a man has to push his principles aside and do the right thing." A saying that has been in the public domain for a long time and is still repeated occasionally in the interest of what we now call situational ethics. But let's get back to this matter of life and the love of life. There was a great deal of love and affection in our family. I have no idea whether it was more or less than in other families, because it never occurred to me to make comparative judgments about this in those growing years. We were what we were, and we had what we had. We lived on a farm, and much of my time was spent with my father in the early years. If he was cultivating or plowing, I would often be on the back of the workhorse, the reins going under my arms, back to father at the plow handles. Yet I could imagine myself to be in complete command as I sat there just behind the horse's head. When not on the horse, I was often walking in the furrow behind the plow, feeling the cool, moist richness of the turned earth, stopping to watch or pick up the wriggling earthworms whose homes were being disturbed. Occasionally, we might disturb a nest of mice, and there would be little quick rustles in the grass. The sun rising above us would get warmer and warmer as the morning turned to noon. It was a lovely world, and all the people who inhabited it were loving persons. Certainly there were problems, but somehow they were solved or seemed to be solved. Certainly we children were not always at peace with one another, and there were sudden storms and tears and anger and anguish, but these passed as squalls do. Our home was in a river valley. The meadows that flooded in spring but were dry in summer were a constant playground. The river itself was a familiar place, a part of the homeland to be used with care. Here were boats and fish and fishermen who came from miles around on weekends to rent our boats and share their catch with us. Here in winter, we harvested the ice for the summer, a daring, adventurous week, riding the ice cakes that had been marked and plowed and hauled in sled to the ice house. Here a boy was with men, for the neighbors joined in this sharing of labor, and all the ice of several families was cut at the same time. But here, too, there was love and care and interest. I speak of these memories, for it is out of them that basic patterns of life develop, and it is upon them that the man who was then a boy develops. I loved life in those days. It was always new. It was often exciting. There were adventures, real and imagined, in groups of boys and also alone. I wandered the woods in winter and summer, knew where the best berries were for every season, watched the lady slippers and the jack-in-the-pulpits come to be in the swampy places and the dark woody places. It was a land in which it was good to be alive. It was a life to love. There came times when the desire to share this love with others became important. It was not enough to know this alone. And so came adolescence with its doubts and anxieties and trembling uncertainty, the hesitant approach to girls, the struggle to ask the first date of my life, the sweating moments as I approached her front door to meet her mother and her father, and the graciousness of their greeting and the ease of their acceptance meant much to me. Oh, there was pain in those years too. The struggle to become identified apart from the family, apart from my father and mother, to be me, an individual, a decision maker, a chooser of directions for myself. At 12, my older brother, then 14, decided it was time to visit Provincetown. It wasn't really Provincetown we wanted to see. Of course, that was the excuse. What we really wanted was the adventure of taking the excursion boat from Boston across the 50 miles of Massachusetts Bay to the tip of Cape Cod. And so we did, only to be caught that afternoon in a heavy fog, causing the excursion boat to anchor somewhere outside of Boston Harbor. We spent the night in the most exciting adventure of our young lives. Sometime past midnight, a ship's officer, probably the purser, noticed us in the ship's lounge and led us to a cabin. He also asked our names and where we lived and our parents' names. Later, we learned that this information had been radio telephoned ashore, and our parents had been called and notified of our whereabouts. Later, I realized the thoughtfulness of this action and knew the relief it had brought to our home that night. Well, it is out of life itself that one may come to love life. It is in the process. It is in the giving of love and the evidence of concern that this meaning accumulates. The passage of years both dims and heightens the early memories. With me, many of the uglinesses have been subdued, and it is difficult now to recall the pain that undoubtedly was present again and again. But on balance, there were, I am convinced, always less than the affirmations and the kindnesses and the genuine goodness that I found in life. Only in later years did the cruelties of existence come to bear on me. And as they did more and more, the realization grew that it was not life which was cruel, but that cruelty was a product of human conduct, that it rose out of human relationships that failed, that it followed the choice decisions of men and women that were against life rather than with it, that life itself was a neutral arena in which person after person might turn the temperature to love or hate. It began to dawn on me that behind these choices and decisions, whether good or ill, there was always involved the conception that the person had of life itself, that there was a theology or a philosophy or a conviction or a belief, that it has much to do with what I will call the soul of man. I say the soul of man, knowing that in the very saying, some of you will lose interest, will feel that I have ventured too far, have reached out for a term that has no meaning, no substance, is an empty word. But do not be hasty and quick to run away from this word. It, as all other words we use, is a symbol. It does have a relationship to that which is real, but the reality may be difficult to grasp, not impossible. Let us take 3 or 4 minutes to explore this word, and our guide in this exploration is A. Powell Davies, one of the greatest of our ministers in the Unitarian Universalist movement in this century, minister of All Souls Unitarian Church in Washington, D.C. He spoke one Sunday on the question, "What then is soul?" It is from that source I offer you these insights. Soul, said Dr. Davies, is just as real as mind, just as real as matter. No one knows what any of them are in terms of final definition. Yet everyone has experience of them, that is, an experience of mind and matter. It is possible to reduce your experience with each. You can lower the level of physical existence if you choose to, become less healthy, less active, less physically alive. So too, you can reduce the experience of mental activity. All you need do is use the mind less. So also with the spiritual experience of quality of life. This can be repressed, reduced, starved, if you will. But as it is possible to reduce these, so it is possible to increase, strengthen, and enhance each one. Consider this. When the stuff of the universe becomes alive in the first instance, we conceive of it as physically alive. We use this term to describe the lower level or orders of life, as grass and trees become alive, and then as animals become alive. The first evidence of life is physical. But animal life may, and often does, have more than this simple physical evidence. It may, and usually does, have some type of intelligence. At the human level of physical life, this intelligence is greater and more powerful and more effective. Life, in addition to its physical quality, also has a mental quality. Man, in the process of existence, adds a still further characteristic to life. He not only lives and reasons, he also has feeling and responses. He feels beauty, feels the claim of justice or mercy, feels the call of truth, may come to some sense of the ultimate, that even though mysterious and not altogether clear, has relationship to the physical life, the mental life. It is at this juncture, at the point where these come together, we venture to speak of soul. For at this point of the gathering together of the physical, the mental, and the feeling facts of existence, there is a new and different measure of awareness, a new and deeply intensified inward life. It is just as mysterious as the physical life, as the mental life, but not more mysterious than either of these. It is as real as either of them. In these sentences, I have indicated the way in which Dr. Davies brought a significance of meaning to the word soul. I offer it to you as a possible direction for your own thinking and discovery. In any event, this is the meaning that I have in my own mind as I use the word. It, too, is a process of life, not given, but discovered or developed or arrived at. Nor can we stop with this awareness. For there is no guarantee at all that arrival of yourself to the point of this awareness will ensure that you love life. On the contrary, you may despise it intensely. Yet I would say that until you do have this awareness that is beyond the physical and mental process, there is very little chance indeed for making the great decisions, the overriding decisions of your life. The decision to either hate or love life. Eric Hoffer comments on this in many ways in his small volume of brief essays and insights into human behavior, called The Passionate State of Mind. Let me read 2 or 3 of these which relate to our concern this morning. In this godless age, writes Hoffer, man is still preoccupied with the saving of his own soul. The discrediting of established religions has not resulted in a weakening of the religious impulse. Now the individual must do his own soul saving, and he is at it 24 hours a day. There is an eruption of fanaticism in all departments of life: business, politics, literature, art, science, and even in lovemaking and sport. The elimination of the sacerdotal outlet thus results in a general infection and inflammation of the social body. And in another observation he says, as the world pokes its fingers into our souls, it now and then touches bedrock, something compact, real, unequivocal. And whether it be genuine disgust, joy, grief, pity, shame, or desire, it is accompanied by a vague sense of gratification. We are gratified by the discovery that we are not all sham and show, for we are not really sure of the genuineness of our convictions, feelings, tastes, and desires. As I see our world today, and as I meet with the young men and women of our churches and beyond, one thing impresses me again and again. It is their desperate effort to discover something genuine in life. They are so aware of the sham, the fakery, and the falsity, the deceit, the mask, that they drive with great intensity to pierce these facades and find something that is really real that they can do and feel as they do to be truly honest and truly their own doing. They do wish to love life, it seems to me, and on every hand the world that is appears to thwart their wish. They think they are alone in this desire. They do not know how it haunts the adult world as well, even though they see the desperate ways in which the adult world strives to deny that this is so. Today, yesterday, and tomorrow, I will say, "Life, I love you," and this, it truly seems to me, is my response to life. What is it that I love? It is not the many things that have been set around me, and in which I am myself set. It is not the man-made environment of the city that I love, nor is it the madness of men in their pursuit of things that rust, will consume, and moths destroy. No, it is far vaster and broader and embracing than these. It is the fact of being. It is existence. It is the wonder of life itself that I love. It is the possibilities it allows, the chance of becoming more than I have yet become, the possibility, if you will, of the attainment of soul. Yet this is not all either. For in the process of life itself, I find this love of life within me. It comes in the sharing and the caring and in the moving. It comes in little unobtrusive ways, in more often than in great and obvious ones. It comes in the struggle as well as in relaxation from the struggle. It comes in the sense that what I am is wholly me. It comes in the knowledge that I have no quarrel with life, but that is always an opportunity in which doors close behind as other doors open ahead. So I say, life, I love you. Join us for worship every Sunday at 10 a.m. at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Canandaigua, a welcoming congregation. We are located at 3024 Cooley Road, 4 miles west of South Main Street, Canandaigua, just north of the intersection with Routes 5 and 20. Look for the blue signs just before the turn. Your comments about this program or questions about the church are welcome at 585-396-1370 or at our website, www.canandaiguauu.org. Producer and editor, Daniel Brigham.